we did a seminar at the University of Chicago, and we were struggling to come up with a name for it that we were doing there. He runs an institute there, and I finally suggested on a conference call, why don't we just call it what it is, Campaign 2016 WTF, which turned out to be pretty accurate of where we were. I listened to some of the panels. I listened to one of the panels that was going on before. I'm not going to get into what's this going to mean for ACA at the end. I'll just give a prediction on broadly what it's about. But you know what happened on Election Day. I was going to say a big victory for Donald Trump, but we've had another election where the one candidate won the Electoral College and one candidate's going to end up winning the popular vote, and it's going to end up winning the popular vote by a fairly large margin when all the absentees and early votes are counted. My guess is Hillary Clinton will end up winning the popular vote by about 1.5 million votes. Simultaneously, Donald Trump will have gotten more Electoral College votes than any Republican since 1988. So he'll have lost the popular vote by a rather large margin. By a larger margin than Hillary Clinton will win the popular vote by a larger margin than John F. Kennedy won it by, than Richard Nixon when he first won it by, than George W. Bush, than Al Gore won it by and lost the election in the Electoral College in 2000. So it's understanding this election and understanding where the country is and understanding what it means. It's important to look at all those data points. I'm not making an argument that Donald Trump is not the legitimate President of the United States. He is the President of the United States, legitimately elected, very well done in a campaign. And we saw what happened in the United States Senate, you saw what happened in the United States House, and what happened in the state legislatures. It's a situation where going into Election Day, there was all this conversation about, what's going to happen to the Republican Party, and are they done as an institution, and what's happened going on? And immediately following on Wednesday, what's going to happen to the Democratic Party? Can it go on? And I think we're in that situation now. There's a couple of factors that I'm going to touch on briefly in this. One of the fascinating things about this, and if you were at the last conference, I talked about this, the pattern and the story of this election was pretty much set in motion the moment Hillary Clinton decided to run for president and Donald Trump decided to run for president. And how that unfolded in the immediate aftermath of their speeches, this was a story that was unprecedented, but seemingly very predictable about where we are as a country today. And so Hillary Clinton, the dominant force of the Democratic Party, the name, the organization, everything about it, was going to have a very difficult time, though a flawed candidate she was and an unpopular candidate she was, losing the Democratic primary. She almost did. In this, though the weight of the establishment pushed her across the finish line. Donald Trump, when he started, he came down the escalator, pushed through. Within 60 days, and I had said this, I had thought he was going to be the Republican nominee for president because of the dynamic of the Republican Party and what was going to happen, and inability for other candidates to come together. So these sort of movable forces launched 500 days ago or so, ended up at the finish line in exactly the same level of popularity that they started. Think about that. So a campaign was run, more than $1 billion was spent, television media, lots of tweets were sent, and Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton's favorable ratings did not change by the time they got to Election Day. Their unfavorable and favorable ratings were exactly the way they were when the campaign began months and months and months ago. And so we arrive at where the country ended up. People have asked about the polls, what happened. This has been a coming problem. But the interesting thing, the national polls are going to turn out more accurate than they were in 2012. In 2012, the average of the national polls were that Barack Obama was going to win by 1 point. That was the average of the national polls in 2012. He won by 4 points. So they were 3 points off. This year, the average of the national polls were that Hillary Clinton was going to win by 3 points. She's going to end up winning by 1 point or 1.5 points. So 2 points or 1.5 points off. So the national polls actually, interestingly enough, were more accurate this year, still off, but more accurate this year than the national polls in 2012. What was very problematic were the state polls. And the state polls in many places, but especially in the industrial Midwest, primarily in the industrial Midwest, were off. And a lot has to do with what voters came and what voters didn't turn out. So on the Trump side of this, there has been a brewing sense of the forgotten voters. The voters that people sort of not concentrated on, that either Democrats took for granted or Republicans took for granted. It's sort of what I would call an industrial Midwest, the white sort of working middle class, the white middle class, non-college educated. And those voters, on one side of the equation, provided Donald Trump with his margin of victory. But on the other side of the equation was about 4 or 5 million Democrats did not turn out in this election across the country. 4 or 5 million that were supposed to turn out, that were you would have guessed they were going to turn out in the way that he's going to do, and a big chunk of those were in the industrial Midwest. They were across the country, industrial Midwest. So we had a higher turnout among some voters and a drastically lower turnout among another set of voters. And so what do we have? We have an upset country, and I'm going to talk about some of the things I talked about last time. We have two candidates that were disliked and distrusted by a majority of the country, which is why the latest, I don't know if you saw the poll, the Gallup poll this week, when they asked Americans, are you proud of the election? Only 1/3 of the Americans said they were proud of this election. A quarter of Donald Trump's voters who voted for Donald Trump did not think he was fit or qualified to be president. And they voted for Donald Trump to be president, which tells you the level of frustration and anger and apprehension that existed, especially in certain parts of the country. And so where the country is today, a whole group of tribes, unfortunately, in the country that we've all segmented ourselves, if you were here last time we talked about this, we all segment ourselves into tribes. It's very difficult to get out in the perceptions that we look at each other. 98% of Trump voters couldn't stand Hillary Clinton. 98% of Hillary Clinton voters couldn't stand Donald Trump. They're all located in their own sort of homogeneous groups of voters, which is an unfortunate development in our country. There's an urban versus small town, an urban versus rural. There's a non-white versus white. There's a whole group of this segmenting that's going on. So you have that dynamic. You also have, on election day, interesting conflict, which is 2/3 of the voters on election day thought we were on the wrong track and going in the wrong direction, and 55% of voters gave Barack Obama a positive job approval rating on election day. So they separated those two things. They separated Hillary Clinton from Barack Obama, and they voted sort of the wrong track in this. The other thing that emerged from this is obviously there's been brewing a sense of economic frustration through a large body of voters in this country. Not the sort of voters in the top 5% or top 10%, but a huge part of the voters in this country who have not seen an increase in their standard of living in 30 years. Through Republican administrations, Democratic administrations, through high-tech booms, through all sorts of things, they have not seen a relative improvement of their standard of living in more than 30 years. And that will give you a sense of why the country, as I said to somebody the other day, had a bit of a tantrum on election day in their voice of what they want. Even though their head said one thing, their heart and their gut wanted to go in a different direction. And the other part is this huge body of voters are sick of the establishment of both political parties. Fundamentally of both political parties. They're sick of the establishment in Washington. They're sick of the same way of doing things. They want something done differently. They think since nothing has changed, they keep getting told all these things are going to be, you're going to pass these trade deals and you'll be better off. We're going to reform this tax code and you'll be better off. And at each step of the way, they haven't seen their life improved. And so what happens in this? We have what I call the revenge of the independents. Bernie Sanders is an independent, 74-year-old socialist from Vermont, and won, I think, 21 or 22 states in the Democratic primary, being initially behind by 50 points. Donald Trump is basically an independent. He has changed parties 7 times in the last 18 years. In this, he basically did a hostile takeover of the Republican Party. He's not an ideologue. He has a certain stance on certain issues, but he's not an ideologue. He's not really a conservative on most fundamental issues. And so what we had here is basically, as I say, the revenge of the independents. What I like to describe it as, it's as if a meteor hit the political planet, and the dinosaurs, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, are slowly dying. And something is going to take their place, either going to be refashioned in a totally new image, a totally new type of wildlife that they'll be refashioned into, or something else is going to emerge all along. The Republican Party, as we watch this unfold, is being refashioned. It used to be the party of free trade. It used to be the party of many different things. Donald Trump is now the leader of that party, and there's no telling where that party will end up. It's now a different coalition of voters, which has been coming for many years. It's a total different coalition of voters than it used to be before. Democrats are going to have to go through the exact same thing. If they're going to win state races, they still are the party that can put together a coalition to win the popular vote nationally better than the Republican Party that exists today. But if you look at the state legislatures across the land, I think they only hold the governorship and the state legislators in 5 or 6 states right now. They only hold that. Republicans, I think, hold it in 35 or 33. And so they're having a very difficult time winning races out in the state-by-state basis, other than New York and places like California or Vermont. And so the Democratic Party is going to have to come to terms with that. So this meteor hits. There's a misimpression that I think people have, that they look at Donald Trump like a volcano or an earthquake, right? Wow, this, and we're going to look at it and observe it and talk about it. But really what's been going on is the tectonic plates of our country have been shifting for 20 years. Politically, economically, and culturally, it's been shifting for 20 years. And people haven't paid attention to it. And leaders haven't paid attention to it. And the political parties haven't paid attention to it. And then it erupted. It erupted over the course of the last 15 months. It erupted almost with Hillary losing in her primary. It erupted with her losing the general election. It erupted when Donald Trump won the Republican primary. And it erupted. The interesting thing about this is Donald Trump really is not a cause of this. He's a symptom of this change that's coming. He's his own candidate in his own right, and he's really good and does really well on branding and all those things he does on social media, but he really is a symptom of this change that was coming. Donald Trump managed to basically end the legacy of 2 political families, the Bush family and the Clinton family, and he's almost on the verge of ending the organizational ability of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Both of those things. Now, he alone hasn't caused it, as I said, but it's a brewing thing. We have to understand what's happened in this election and what it means for us. I think I want to just touch back on a couple of things I said last time, because it bears repeating in where we are today. We've gone through this unbelievable wrenching change in our country. Economic change. Tremendous economic change. As great a change as when we moved from an agrarian economy to an industrial-based economy for most people out there. There's questions about this. There's questions about capitalism today. Does it serve the broad base of the country? There's fundamental questions about equity and whether or not people have actually a part of the American dream in this. We are experienced our 3rd industrial revolution, and we are on the outside of that 3rd industrial revolution in our country, which was a more technologically driven industrial revolution. But a huge portion of voters have had the delight of the entertainment quality and the communication quality and the connected quality of technological change, but they have not seen anything about their own personal finances change because of the economy, because of that technological change in the economy. So they can entertain themselves with phones and iPhones and all those sorts of things, or go on the internet, but whether or not their job is better, their paycheck is better, has not fundamentally changed because of the technological revolution for a big part of the country, especially in that industrial Midwest. Cultural change, economic cultural change. We've redefined marriage. In the last 5 years, we've totally redefined marriage. We're redefining sex. We're redefining what it means to be male or female. We're redefining families. We're redefining a religion. The largest group, the fastest growing group now are people that say they're unaffiliated with any particular religion. They call themselves spiritual, but not religious. That's the fastest growing group of people, voters out there in this. So religious institutions along with all the cultural institutions. The technological change, as I've alluded to, has been as quick and as fast as any time in the history of our human civilization. And what that means to people is how they address things and how they process things and all of that because of technological change. The problem with it is we have more knowledge today and less wisdom. We have more data and more information, but less ability to put in a context for us to understand what is going on, to pause, to rest long enough to understand it, what does it mean, and to have a proper understanding to make informed decisions. So we have all this information and all this knowledge, but we have a lack of leaders in our communities to sort of give us a context for it and to give us the wisdom surrounding all of this information. And finally, we've lost faith and trust in nearly every single one of our institutions simultaneously. Our corporate institutions, our church institutions, our political institutions, and our governmental institutions, starting with Washington, D.C., less so in our state capitals, and even less so. Only institutions we still fundamentally trust are local institutions. And so there's a hunger as people lose all of that, lose all that faith, and lose all that in institutions and go through economic and cultural change. They want to know where their community is, where they belong. And the internet is giving people an ability to connect, but not giving them deep connections, which is what they really want. Who do I belong to? What part of America am I in? What does it mean to be an American today? What does it mean to be a person that's in an American capitalist society, and how does that help me, or what does that do for me, and how do my dreams coincide with that? And so, by the time we got to November, what unfolded was a battle between Reformation and transformation. And the Electoral College chose Reformation, and the popular vote chose transformation. And if you think about that battle is not going to end. And by Reformation, I mean there's a whole group of voters that say, I liked it the way it was. Can I go back to the way it was? Can I go back where my community and my jobs and my parents' jobs, and it was all the thing back in some time where we had manufacturing jobs, or where we were protected, or I felt safe. And the transformation is we're in a broad new country, new America, growing groups of voters that are unlike anything we've ever seen, growing groups of ideas about things, progressive on certain issues, changes our views of various faith and all of those things, cultural issues. And that battle is going to keep going for a while until we have leaders that emerge to figure out how to get those people that wanted reformation into a place of transformation where they feel safe and secure in an environment in a country that no longer looks to them like a country they were born into or their parents were born into. A huge split and a divide in our country as we go forward. And so what needs to sort of, that leaders that are going to need to do that, we have to figure out a way, and I love the back of the booklet that you all have, which talks about people and talks about innovation. To me, that's the path to success here. We have to figure out a way to use disruption, though that innovates, and it gets us to a place where people thrive. It's the only model. It's an entrepreneurial model that is the only thing I think that is going to get it there. It's not going back and patching up some old institution that we thought we still needed. It is figuring out what are the new institutions, or if it's an old institution, to fundamentally change how it looks. Not just put paint on it or put a window shade on it, but fundamentally change an old institution so it adapts to today through some entrepreneurial way. It is what, as I said when I was here last time, it's what our founding fathers and founding mothers were fundamentally all about. They were the ultimate entrepreneurs. They were ultimate entrepreneurs. They did a startup, and the startup was a country. And they put their money, and they put their lives, and they put everything on the line because they didn't think the country was meeting the needs and dreams of the vast bulk of the country. They gave up positions of privilege. They gave up things in order to do that. We are at a time when we need, in our own way, to figure out how we're going to do that. So when we look at that, what are the lessons for politics and governance that we learned just watching this last campaign? I have a couple that I wanted to mention. First, television ads matter little in presidential races. And organization matters little in presidential races. It's broad sways in how people get in touch, how they access you on social media, how they learn about you through other means, through the web, through their friends talking about it, through emails, all of that. Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump in most of those states that she lost by 3 or 4 to 1 margins. Jeb Bush spent $120 million and got 4 delegates to the National Convention. 4 delegates to the National Convention. Donald Trump spent a chunk of money, but Donald Trump spent, in relative case, for presidential campaigns in the last 20 years, lower than anybody has spent before when you look at it in comparison cases to today's dollars. So dollars and organizations, while important, matter so much less than they ever have before. And the people that rely on those things as thinking it's going to solve some fundamental problems or flaws, as Hillary Clinton had approaching on election day, Donald Trump had them too, some fundamental flaws, but Donald Trump understood the environment and how people talk to each other better than Hillary Clinton or better than all the smart people that surrounded her in that. 2, there's the gatekeeper quality of the 2 political parties is gone. Their ability to sort of say, this is the way we want it, and this is the way it's going to be, and this is the candidates we're going to want is gone. And their ability to sort of cobble something together and get somebody elected that the American public doesn't want no longer works. So gatekeeper party gone, which means we're going to continue on a party breakdown. 3, there's a troubling development, which is how Americans consume information, which is Americans are now, as I said, are locating themselves in more and more homogeneous silos and consuming information that confirms their biases. That is a troubling development for our democracy, which means people are accessing information. It's a natural human tendency. You access information that confirms what you already believe, and you ignore information that makes you uncomfortable, that's against what you believe. And that is putting us more and more into a tribal sense of a country, into tribal sense, which then develops into the 4th thing that we've learned, is we no longer share a common set of facts. There's multiple sets of facts on multiple issues. And when you don't share a common set of facts, it's very difficult to reach consensus on the big issues. This, to me, is one of the biggest problems Washington, D.C. is headed for, is there's no agreement on a common set of facts. There's no agreement. And because people access information, what happens when you access information? You have an opinion on something and you access information that confirms that opinion. And you do that 4 or 5 times, that opinion becomes a fact. So if you have an opinion and I have an opinion, we can reach agreement. We can compromise because we're compromising opinion. You can't compromise a set of facts if you believe they're a set of facts, and I can't. Because I say this is the right, this is the truth, this is the way it is, and you say it, and there's no ability to come together. That's a big problem, and that's going to be a huge problem in Washington, D.C. 5, because of social media and because of the way media is consumed, events and moments are processed through the system very quickly. So something happens, and give you an example, the Billy Bush video on the bus, right? Any other campaign, any other time that ends a candidacy, overdone, complete. That got processed through the system of the body politic fairly quickly. It hurt Trump, it got processed, and then it got processed out, and then there was something new that approached, whether it's the Comey letter or all of the different things. It's almost as if our information is like Chinese food, right? So it's like, oh, hurry up, satisfy me. I'm hungry 2 hours later. What's the deal? What's next? What's happening? And so the information, it used to be something happened, a week, 2 weeks, it goes through the system and it finally exits the system. Now it's 48 hours, 72 hours, maybe 4 days at most. It goes in and out of the system fairly quickly, and you have to keep that in mind if you're a person at all addressing the public sphere. And finally, on these points, we are in time in an accelerated process of change. You know it, everybody in this room is aware of accelerated process of change in being in the healthcare industry, but the political process of change and the governance process of change, we're finally in an accelerated process. The last 2 areas of real innovative, disruptive change to come were our politics and our governance. But it's finally arrived, and it needed to. We're in dire need of innovative, disruptive change, just like it's occurred in almost every other part of our economy, and it's finally come to politics. I don't fully know what the outcome of that will be and what it will look like in the aftermath of this. This is a change that we're going to watch unfold for the next 10 or 12 years. This isn't Donald Trump, all the things go back to normal, or he loses a re-election campaign in 2020 and we're all back to normal. This is not. That old world is gone. The old world of the two duopoly parties and the way they existed before and the ideological battles they had before is over. And now it's going to be who's going to be part of the change. And so some things to keep in mind in that. The most valuable connections you can have are a values connection with people. How you connect with them in your gut. It's not, in this time of fundamental change, it's not an argument that people want in their head, it's an argument they want to connect in their gut. Donald Trump, in much of those places, a large part of the swath of the country, connected people in their gut. There was a great thing that somebody said, which is that all of us in the media took Donald Trump literally, but not seriously. The voters took Donald Trump seriously, but not literally. And they basically heard him say a lot of things and were like, he doesn't really mean that. But he seems like he's going to fight for me. He seems like he's going to do something for me. He seems like he's finally speaking for me. He seems like he understands me. He seems like somebody's finally standing up there and voicing some concerns I have. But all that other stuff and, all the other stuff, I'm not really listening to it. And that's a huge thing to keep in mind, is how do you have a values connection? Authenticity, interestingly enough, in this election, still is a preeminent value that people want. How authentic and genuine you are. How do you connect? The country wants leaders that put country over party. And this is, I think, one of the biggest problems, when the Democrats, in many ways, forced the Democratic voters to sort of take Hillary Clinton on. It was like party matters, party matters, party matters, party matters. And Donald Trump's disruptive force. I think Donald Trump makes a huge mistake if he basically sees himself as the Republican leader, and this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to do whatever is the best case for the Republican Party, which is interesting, probably going to be the strategy of his new chief of staff, who is chairman of the Republican National Committee. My fault, or my observation of all of that, wasn't like, okay, who they were or what they were. It was, if the country really wants country over party, putting the leader of the Republican National Committee as your chief of staff isn't actually telling the country that you're willing to put country over party. It's why I started, as Jamie said, this thing called listen2.us, and welcome you to join, which is the whole idea of it is how do we get independent, common sense and people to sort of start pushing country over party. So I'm welcoming you to join. 4, local. Drive decisions as much as you possibly can locally. Drive it to as local as possible. Now, I understand centralization and saving resources, but the more local it is, the more people are going to accept it, the more they're going to trust it, and the more they're going to stick with it. And that is true in business, it's true in politics, and it's true in government. The leaders of the future in government are going to basically force decisions down locally. They're going to force money locally. They may collect it in Washington, or they may collect it in Austin, but the more leaders force decisions down and are made locally, and people can see the money locally and see it's how it's spent and have some accountability for it locally, is the wave of the future, in my view, in this. And finally, on this, strength and kindness. People are looking for the simultaneous grouping of strength and kindness. As I said at this meeting, people will pick strong and wrong over right and weak every time. And in many ways, many voters picked that on election day. They thought Donald Trump was wrong about a bunch of stuff, but they thought he was strong. And they thought Hillary Clinton was right about a bunch of stuff, but they thought she was weak and she wasn't going to take on the status quo. And for many voters in parts of the country. And so I know you all had a conversation about the ACA. I think that however they describe it, it's going to be repealed and replaced. There's no question in my mind. It has to be, politically. Because the Republicans have been talking about this and have launched, I don't know how many, 48 different ways to bring it back. They weren't able to accomplish it, If their voters don't see them, at least in name, repeal and replace it, and now as the other speaker said, they're going to probably keep certain elements of it, but I have a serious question. How do you keep certain elements of it and lose other elements of it, and how do you bandage it together? But it's going to go away. It's going to go away under the current form we have it. What's the outcome of that? I don't know. The big question, I think, in Washington, D.C. is not whether or not whether or not it's going to get repealed and replaced, or whether or not the other big thing that's going to happen is infrastructure. Both political parties are going to do it. But these are going to come down to fundamental dollar decisions. And the Republican Party leadership has to ask themselves, are they going to forego their conversation they've had about dollars? In order to fix the healthcare system and remove it from what it is, you're going to have to be a serious consideration on dollars. And in order to fix infrastructure, there has to be a serious consideration on dollars. And you give up on the idea of our debt's grown too much, our debt's grown too much, we need a balanced budget, we need a balanced budget, we need a balanced budget. To me, that's going to be the ideological debate. It's going to be over dollars. And over, have you given up on the things you talked about for years and years and years and years? And finally, I just want to sort of give you a couple of things that in my wishes, I would love to have, which is your power, the power each of you have. Donald Trump and our senators and our congressmen and our governors, leaders don't lead, they follow. They fundamentally follow. They follow where we want to take them. And it's up to us, to me, if everybody says, what do we do, what do we do, what do we do? We have to lead our leaders to where we want to go. If we want a different system that gets past divisiveness, we have to behave differently towards each other in conversation and all those things. And every single person in this room is a leader in their industry, in their communities, in their families, or whatever it happens to be. So I encourage you and emphasize to you, we have to lead our leaders to where we want them to go. If we're frustrated at the craziness and all of that, we have to show a different way. It's up to us. Second, we have to get past rewarding people that use the ends justify the means. This election, to me, was a huge part of that on all sides of saying, in order to win, I got to do X. We allowed, and the media was involved in this to a large degree, and other elements were. We allowed basically the Russian government to hack into our systems illegally, give it to a group of voters, and give it to a group of an organization and turn that over, and then the media took it up when it was turned over. Now that provided an ability to help somebody win, but is that a good thing? Is basically saying the ends justify the means. The means, you stolen data and this and compromised our security and hacked into our systems and all of those sorts of things. Regardless, I completely agree, it revealed all sorts of things about different worlds in Washington, D.C. and the way they talk to each other and how they treat people, which was very revelatory. But do we really want to have a system of government that basically, and a system of politics that rewards the ends justify the means? And finally, Donald Trump will be a success. And I'm open-minded. I'm very open-minded about it. I didn't vote. I'll just be honest. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I couldn't do it. I felt like I was not going to be forced into that choice between two people that the majority of the country didn't trust and didn't like. But we have to, Donald Trump is going to be a success, which Godspeed, I hope he is. He's going to have to fix the means of governing and not the ends. He has to fix how we talk to each other, how we talk to different leaders, how the parties get together. And to me, if he embraces the independence in our country, which on election day, if you look at the number of independents that basically said, I'm not part of either party, it's growing and growing and growing and growing. And I think that as we watch this unfold, the only way we get to a place of fixing this is if one of the parties or both of the parties embrace, or something new arrives that has the I name on it, that's independent candidates. And watch, I know I predicted many things that would unfold in this course of this year, that the Bushes wouldn't do well, that Hillary Clinton was in trouble, that Donald Trump did this, and I predicted some things very wrongly in this. But in 2018, around the country, get ready for the rise of independent candidates for office, who are basically like, I don't like either one of these, they don't belong to us, and they're going to run for county office, they're going to run for city office, they're going to run for state legislature, they're going to run for statewide office. It's coming because the country is still immensely frustrated and upset about the system that we have. Again, thank you for letting me be here. And again, I encourage you to be the leaders that you are and help lead Washington, D.C., Austin, Texas, or whatever state capital you're in to a place that where we want them to go. Thank you all very much. I don't know if you wanted to take a couple of questions.
We can take a couple questions.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, sir.
Dr.
Lackman. Actually, I have one question. So, with what you're talking about with dissatisfied people, and let me finish my two questions. One is, how is this analogous to Germany in the 1930s? And the second question I have is, how a lot of your speculation and a lot of what you talked about was based on how the Democrats made this choice. Let's step back and Biden's son doesn't die and Biden becomes the nominee.
So on the first question, I'll handle primarily. I don't ever think it's a good idea in a political conversation to bring up 1930s Germany or Hitler. Anybody that's on the... It does when you appoint as your chief strategist a known anti-Semite. Listen, that argument's being made by a lot of number of people. I just think, and they're welcome to make that argument, it's not something, I think, I treat periods in history where 6-7 million Jews, 2 million Christians, many people were obviously slaughtered in the course of that slightly differently. But people can make that argument. I just don't want to, because it shuts people's ears off. Anybody on the opposite side of you that's a Republican, that's a Trump supporter, you bring up Hitler, you're no longer in a conversation with them. The second question is, I don't know. I thought Joe Biden should have run. I thought he could have beat Hillary Clinton. I think he would have been in this environment where if you're talking about white working class in the industrial Midwest, he's from Scranton. He's almost a perfect candidate for that. If you sort of just looking at it generically, I think he would have won and it wouldn't have been close. But what you don't know is how the campaign would have unfolded. You have no idea if he would have made mistakes, what he would have done, what would have been discovered, all of those sorts of things. You don't know. But sort of generally, the Democrats each party nominated their most unelectable candidate. They each nominated. Donald Trump was the most unelectable candidate. I mean, he was probably followed closely by somebody like Ted Cruz, who's probably not far off on electability. And they each nominated, and then the country said, okay, you gave me that choice, and Gary Johnson doesn't seem to smoke too much pot over the course of his 30 years. So now I have only that choice, and now I got to pick between two unelectable candidates. And so I think Biden would have won the primary and probably would have won the general election, but obviously we'll never know.
I like your comments about the independent voter, but the question to you is, can we ever really have a chance at an independent becoming president until we address campaign reform and term limits?
Here's what I think. I think the mistakes that have been made by independents to run they've started at the top. Independents have okay, let's elect a president, right? I think an independent will get elected president of the United States. Let's say just somebody other than a D or an R, we'll call it an independent, will get elected president of the United States in the next 20 years. Within the next 20 years, an independent will be elected president of the United States, something other than a D and R. But it will only happen if people start running locally and it builds a wave. It's like the establishment of democracy anywhere in the world. Take Iraq, for example. It never works top down. People never accept it. So you have to sort of give people an idea. Oh, I see what independents are doing. Oh, I'm starting to vote and sort of realizing I don't have to just do a binary choice. I can figure something else out. That has to rise as a wave, and then when that wave rises, the system will be overcome. The campaign finance won't matter in a system once independents start running and winning locally, which they can. And here's the other secret fact. People think independents are going to rise in purple states. They're going to rise in deep red and deep blue states, because the largest number of voters that are disenfranchised are in places like Texas and in places like California or New York, if you think about it. Take Texas, for example. Why an independent could rise and win here. About 2/3 of Republicans go along with where the Republicans are. There's about 25 or 30% of Republicans that don't like the choices that they've been given in this state. Democrats have no ability to win statewide here, and they're not going to have an ability to win statewide in Texas for many years. And independents don't feel like they're part of either party. So you combine a portion of the Republicans, all of the Democrats, and independents. That's a large group of disenfranchised voters. That's where it's going to occur. It's going to occur not in places like Ohio or Wisconsin first, it's going to occur in places that are deep blue and deep red, where the frustration level with the current system is reaching an all-time high. And I think we'll
One
take
last
more.
question.
Make it a good one, man. It's pressure.
I'll bring it back to healthcare, and I did tell you last year at lunch you were wrong, but I won't say.
I'm wrong a lot. I'm wrong a
Governor
lot.
Jindal or Dr. Carson's for HHSC secretary, and what does that look like, and what's the impact of that?
Well, I don't know, actually. I don't know. I don't think Governor Jindal will do that. I think for him, that's a step back to do HHS. I think if he wanted something, he's going to want something, a cabinet post that is more instrumental in his mind, I think. Dr. Carson would take it. Dr. Carson would take education. Dr. Carson would probably take any cabinet post that we offered him in this. But I think we're going to see, and it's going to be, I can't wait to see the first picture of the cabinet meeting of a Donald Trump cabinet. I just can't wait to see that picture. And presided over by a chief of staff and Steve Bannon, who's the chief strategist, chief counselor of the president, who ran Breitbart magazine. I just can't imagine what that will look like. And you may get the wife. It sounds like the wife of the WWF. What's her name? McMahon. She's probably going to be in the cabinet. The wife of the McMahon. She's going to be in the cabinet in all likelihood. This is one of the women in the cabinet. So, you thought the Star Wars bar was an interesting scene. It'll be fascinating. It'll be fascinating to see in that. So, I appreciate the time, and y'all have a great rest of your conference. Thank you.